Hello, I am Ron Edwards with ChineseEconomicHistory.com, and we are here today at the World Economic History Congress being held at Kyoto, Japan. And being the first time that the World Economic History Congress has come to this side of the world, over in the Far East, we're taking this occasion to interview prominent Chinese economic historians. And I'm excited to say that we're lucky to have Professor Mio Kishimoto here to visit, and we're going to interview her, ask her some questions. Professor Mio Kishimoto has a master's degree from the University of Tokyo. She is currently professor of history at Ochanomizu University in Tokyo.
In Tokyo.
And would first like to start off asking you the same question we ask for people who are watching ChineseEconomicHistory.com, is, do you think that China's economic development path was the same as that of the West?
I think no. No. Of course, China is a very unique society, different from other countries. So, yes. But of course, the diversity of economic development is very clear among many countries. So, it is not only China that different from other countries.
Yes. Okay. Well, then I'd like to move on and ask you some questions about yourself and your research, and your background in your research. So, how did you become interested in Chinese history?
When I was in junior high school, I was much attracted by Chinese classics, such as Tang poems or Sima Qian's Shiji.
Okay. Sima Qian wrote the history during the Han Dynasty of basically the pre-Han Dynasty history in Chinese, and it's a classic historical book for Chinese history up to the Han Dynasty.
I thought these Chinese classics were very passionate and exciting, more exciting than Japanese classics. So I was much interested in Chinese classics. And after that, in high school, there are classes of Chinese classics in Japanese high school. At that time, I thought I'm good at Chinese classics, so I wanted to study about China. That is one reason, and other reason is Cultural Revolution, Chinese Cultural Revolution.
Yes.
The Cultural Revolution began in 1966. That time I was in the second degree of junior high school, and I knew through the news that the boys and girls of the Red Guard, okay?
The Red Guards, yes.
Yeah, played a very important role in the Cultural Revolution, and their generation is almost the same as me. At that time I was junior high school, so I was very interested, somewhat fearful, but at the same time interested in Chinese society, and the Cultural Revolution let me think about, for example, what is revolution, what is social order, that kind of very important problems.
I see. I've read that at least a couple political scientists of China said that Mao particularly tried to mobilize the young groups into the Red Guards precisely because he was afraid that the older generation, who remembered the Great Leap Forward and some of the other problems, would not support him so much. So he actually consciously used the younger generation to have a revolution of sorts. That's quite interesting and quite strategic. So what kind of methodology or theory were you interested in initially studying Chinese economic history?
Yes, at that time, Marxist historian has much power in Japanese academism, but I was not so interested in Marxist methodology, and I was interested in, for example, Chayanov, the theory of peasant economy. And at that time, Wallerstein's
Yes.
world system theory was very attracted scholars' attention. So I also was interested in Wallerstein's theory.
So Wallerstein's work was stimulating a lot of the young generations, people in Japan at that time?
Yes, yes.
I see.
Around the 1980.
Was it published in Japanese?
Yes, yes.
Okay, they translated versions
Translated
and published.
and published.
I see. So with these interests in mind, who was your advisor in graduate school at the University of Tokyo?
My advisor is Tanaka Masatoshi. He is a very, what shall I say, stern Marxist historian. Yes. But he is not only interested in the objective structure of Chinese society, but also some subjective factors of Chinese society. For example, the emotion of peasants and laborers, and so on. So I very much liked his works.
I see. So his Marxism, stern Marxism, didn't deter him from looking at more subjective, different topics that appeal to you. That's interesting. So in terms of your advisor in the general education, what type of training did you receive? Was it a general education, a particular methodology, or a theory that they tried to impose, or how was your experience in terms of training?
Yes, in Japanese graduate school of history, the main method is to read materials. It is rather, I think, rather different from U.S. Universities. So, at the graduate school, students only read materials very closely, and rarely read books written by historians.
So I'm sorry, when you say read materials, do you mean primary sources?
Yes, primary sources.
So reading primary sources was the main focus, and not books and secondary sources.
Yes. So primary sources written in classic Chinese.
Yes.
We read it so closely that sometimes 3 lines for 2-hour class.
I see. Well, sometimes it can take that long when you have to understand the context of the word in the particular time period. These words change meanings over time, and it takes time. What do you think are the pros and cons of the training that you've received in Japan? The good things and the bad things of the training that you had in Japan.
Yes. Bad things is that it's difficult for Japanese students to develop ability to make a very big macro theory. And good thing is that they had a solid ability to read primarily what shall I say, materials, and they have some feeling, direct feeling to the Chinese society. Do you understand my meaning?
Yes.
That, they can feel what Chinese people and Ming times think, and so on. That is, I think, is a very good,
the good part
point
of
the Japanese education.
So from the primary sources, they had a very strong sense of Chinese society during the Ming and Qing period.
Yes, yes.
And that helped to direct studies in Japan.
Yes, yes. The sense of history that.
I see. So, in particular, were there any historians that had a strong influence on you in your thinking and training?
Yes. I'd like to give three historians.
Okay, this will be interesting.
Though I have not directly received training from them. The first person is Muramatsu Yuji. Muramatsu Yuji, do you remember? Yes. He is a professor of Hitotsubashi University. He wrote a book in 1949. In that book, that dealt with Chinese contemporary economy, he developed some kind of very unique methodology that is rather resemble to today's institutional analysis. So he is not Marxist, so at that time his books was not so popular. But I thought that his work, his methodology is very, very interesting and very clearly analyzed the main characteristics of Chinese economy. That is one person. And the second person is Masubuchi Tatsuo. He's also the professor of Hitotsubashi University, and he is specialized in the Chinese ancient history. And, his method is somewhat like Max Weber, using sociological method. And
so, just to interject, so by ancient Chinese history, I mean roughly the period before the 3rd century BC, or Qin and Han?
Qin and Han. Yes, before Qin and Qin and Han.
Okay, so basically thousands of years ago, up to around 200 AD.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is the ancient Chinese history period.
So then he analyzed the dynamics of Chinese society from somewhat socio-psychological point of view. I heard that it's very, very interesting. That is the second person. And the third person is Shiga Shuzo. He is a very famous historian of Chinese law history. He is,
I'm sorry, law history?
Legal law history. History of Chinese law.
Oh, Chinese law.
Chinese
okay,
law.
Sorry.
Chinese law. So I have attended his seminar, and he was very, what shall I say, a very good historian that could analyze the system of Chinese law in a very structural way, based on a very solid reading of materials. So I respected him very much.
I see.
All three scholars already, what shall I say, not in this world, already died, but
so they passed away, but all of them
passed away as well.
All of them were non-Marxist?
No Marxist.
I see, but Marxism at this point in time in your studies was quite prominent.
Yes.
I see. That's interesting. So in terms of your own research, what are some of the main themes that your research has focused on? So we've covered your training and your interest. What in particular has your research focused on?
When I began the research or now?
Everything, just roughly speaking, what are your main interests in research?
Yes. When I began to study Chinese economic history, the main topic was price history. In my master thesis, I dealt with commodity of prices and in Jiangnan during the first half of the Qin dynasty. And after that, I was interested in foreign trade, a silver problem, that in monetary history, and especially the structure of markets. Market structure was my very interested, favorite theme.
Your favorite theme was market structure.
Market structure.
I see.
And after that, my theme is not only economic history, but also social history or law history, or what shall I say?
Intellectual history.
Intellectual
I
history.
know some of your work from that.
So on. So, but it is not separated from economic history. For example, the economic trends in the late Ming period is very much related with the social situation of that time. So I was gradually extended my field of study.
I see. Well, in general, then, you've strayed outside of the strict field of Chinese economic history into these other fields, social, legal, and intellectual history. Is there any theme that is common to all of your research? And what is that?
The common theme is social order. Social order. I was very much interested in the characteristics of social order of China. I felt that the social order of China and Japan is not the same, very different. So China was a very free and competitive society from ancient times, isn't it?
So ancient times being up to the Han Dynasty, China was kind of relatively competitive and free. And what was Japan like? I mean, you said it was different than Japan.
Different.
How was it? How was Japan, and how was it different from China?
Of course, there is different with period in Japanese history. But for example, the Tokugawa period, there is a rather strict structure of social status.
Yes.
And the control of economic activity was rather strong. So, but Japanese society was rather stable. But in China, for example, Qin China, economy is very free and competitive, and risk is very big.
Mm-hmm.
Risk is very big. So Chinese people developed many methods, many measures to cope with that risk. That is, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, I see, and that seems to be linked to your interest in market structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
market structure, or law history, intellectual history, and social history. Everything related with the problem of social order.
I see. That's interesting. So you said the most interesting part of Chinese economic history was the market structure in general. Outside of not necessarily speaking directly only to Western Europe, do you think China's development pattern was completely different from other areas?
I don't think completely China's development trajectory is completely different from other societies. But well, of course, there is difference. What shall I say that? Actually, history is developing in a very complex situation. So every country's developing pattern is, cannot but different. So. So I think China's development pattern is not the same as other countries.
I see. So one last question I can't resist to ask, because at least in the United States 20 or 30 years ago, it was extremely rare to see a woman as a professional scholar in academia. And so I'd like to ask you, how have you found it, being a woman as a professional academic in Japan?
Yes, of course, in Japan, the difficulty for women to get a job in university was much more big than U.S. and the late 20th century.
Much more difficult?
Much more difficult. So when I began to study Chinese history, I did not think that I can get a job at university. So I studied Chinese economic history only because I like it. I was very lucky. Actually very lucky to have a job in Japanese university. Actually, I was not feel difficulty as a woman scholar in the universities I worked. But of course, there's a big problem for a big difficulty for Japanese women scholars to work in university. For example, how to look the children or something like it. So even if there is no little problem within the university, but there are many problems in their family.
Are things changing now in Japan? Are more women becoming scholars?
Of course, changing. It is rather easy for women to have a job in university. So I think there is a little difference when a university when they first
hire
first hired, but after that they are married and have children, and difficult increase.
I see. I see. That's interesting. Well, Professor Mio Kishimoto is quite a well-established Chinese economic historian here in Japan, quite eminent, and so I think it wasn't simply due to luck. She's done quite a bit of very strong research, both theoretically and empirically, and we're happy to have had a chance to interview you here at the World Economic History Congress. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And it's been a pleasure. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference here. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having the time for us.
Thank you.
And we are here today at the World Economic History Congress being held at Kyoto, Japan, and being the first time that the World Economic History Congress has come to this side of the world, over in the Far East. We're taking this occasion to interview prominent Chinese economic historians. And I'm excited to say that we're lucky to have Professor Mio Kishimoto here to visit, and we're going to Hello, I am Ron Edwards with ChineseEconomicHistory.com.
It is not only China that different from other countries.
Yes. Okay. Well, then I'd like to move on and ask you some questions about yourself and your research, and your background in your research. So, how did you become interested in Chinese history?
When I was in junior high school, I was much attracted by Chinese classic.
Interviewer asked her some questions. Professor Mio Kishimoto has a master's degree from the University of Tokyo. She is currently professor of history at Ochanomizu University in Tokyo.
In Tokyo.
And would first like to start off asking you the same question we ask for people who are watching ChineseEconomicHistory.com, is, do you think that China's economic development path was the same as that of the West?
I think no. No. Of course, China is a very unique society, different from other countries. So, yes. But of course, the diversity of economic development is very clear among many countries. So,